Morning, everyone. I'm Steph, your host for today. Thank you for joining us at our Virtual Fireside Chat live and broadcast from our Canon studios. It's an amazing place. Before I introduce our speakers, a quick housekeeping note that this session is being recorded, and I'd appreciate if everyone will facilitate the discussion and make sure that our speakers answer your questions throughout this session. So now I have the pleasure of introducing Chris and Raji, our speakers for today, who will share their insights around our adoption and cybersecurity.
Thanks, Steph.
So I'm starting off with you, Raji, our in-house expert in everything AI and data. Your extensive experience, we have had a lot of chats in this space, is only second to your passion in spreading the word about AI and making sure it works for everyone. To get us warmed up, what is the one phrase or quote that you like to live by?
I'd like to say the quote from the movie Matrix. There's a big difference between knowing the path and walking the path.
Amazing, very apt for today's session. And over to you, Chris, our resident security and governance expert who has a passion for guiding organizations through solutions with security and compliance built in. How about you, Chris? Have you got a quote that you live by?
I do. It was from one of my first ever managers. Every failure leads to success.
Amazing. It's a good one to go by. So our topic today is deploying AI with guardrails and avoiding common pitfalls. Just to give everyone a bit of time to put questions into the chat, I'll head over to you, Raji. Over the last 18 months, you've run more than 20 AI accelerator sessions across leadership teams. You've hosted roundtables, presented at conferences. What have you seen this year that's changed compared to last year?
So last year, a lot of organizations are doing experiments in AI, maybe deploying things like Copilot to get staff productivity up, as well as exploring agents like pilots and experimenting. But this year, you're seeing almost like an AI reset, where looking at a lot of things have changed. So looking at where you are right now and planning for this year, and maybe productionizing some of those solutions, and looking at use cases that were probably very difficult before, now coming into like more production-ready capability with changes in technology and the way people are accustomed to AI.
Yeah, so now there's a lot of technology that enables a lot of what they want to happen as well.
Yeah, that's right. So technology disruption, as well as the users and staff are more accustomed to using AI.
Yeah. And Chris, how about you? From your perspective, what are you seeing in terms of how organizations are approaching this right now?
Similar thing. We're going from pilots, experimentation to now production. The biggest challenge, or the observations that we're seeing, is now the actual cyber risks and threats that have been created by deploying such technologies. The concept around AI from a business perspective makes a lot of sense, but as an organization, you're putting a lot of risk with that as well. So things like customer data, PII information, things that we take for granted that we think is inherently secure because we've got the guardrails. Once AI now comes into picture, it's not just one system talking to another system, it's multiple different data pathways and pathways that were not existent before.
Getting exposed.
Exactly. So, and the good thing about the business driving that, I guess the foundational steps around AI, we have to evolve as a cybersecurity organization, ensure that we're supporting the business.
Yeah.
We're seen as the no people typically, but we now need to change our stance and enable that, because security should be an enabler, not a disabler to business.
Fantastic. Absolutely. So Raji, a stat that I've come across is less than 1 in 4 organizations have scaled AI successfully across customer-facing and operational domains. So what challenges are organizations encountering when they try to move AI into production?
Yes, a lot of organizations and even the noise around everywhere is focusing on tools, systems, language models. But the biggest challenge I see is the AI literacy. So a recent study by RMIT highlighted that only 7% of corporate users are advanced AI users. The more alarming stat is that about over 50% of users are very beginner users. So when you're rolling out these solutions to users, especially when there's an interactive component in there, the users are not ready to use AI because we are used to clicking buttons, dropping down menus, to traditional SaaS-based, interacting with SaaS-based applications. Now you are asked to prompt and iterate. So the different mindset. So AI literacy is one of the biggest challenges organizations are facing to roll out solutions to production.
Interesting. And what about you, Chris? From a security and governance perspective, what do you see?
So a few years ago, this concept was might happen. Now it's reality. So us having to have an AI policy is super critical to the success of any AI project. And we have to form it based on certain standards. Whether you're within the FSI sector, we have certain regulations around APRA, CPS 230, 234. AI actually breaks a lot of these regulations, and our policies don't adhere to that. So as an organization, we need to now pivot and adjust to do that. If you think of an example of banking, for example, if I need to apply for a loan now, it used to be a manual process. It'll take 2 weeks to get it, whereas now AI can do that loan application within 43 minutes potentially. But by doing that, you have to break every single silo in order to do that. And unfortunately, it breaks every single policy when it comes to cybersecurity. So as long as we're aware of what's being, I guess, affected and we're adhering to our policies, that's what governs everything. And the policy is not just derived from the security team. It's the business. It's from the board level to the CEO, to the executive, all the way down. And we're all responsible now for everything. Before it used to be the security team was responsible for everything.
Yeah.
We now have ownership across the board now, which should be the case. And we have to be responsible now for those sorts of outcomes that we're setting for our customers.
It is a fine line in getting that balance as well to make sure, like I said, it's not a barrier, like got that speaker, but getting it right at the same time and not exposing.
So, and there will be some hiccups in the way, and that's why we need to be contained in deploying things initially, have the right user groups in place, just to see what will happen. Because sometimes we discover things that we weren't aware of.
Yes.
And if we look at it from a threat landscape point of view now, attacks are now happening with velocity speed because of AI.
Yeah.
So we're now seeing an AI war when it comes to cybersecurity now. So we have to make sure that we're helping our systems by defending them, and they need their own AI, security guards to help them to defend them from the people that are out there as well.
Absolutely. All right, we are getting questions. So we've got one from David Moody. For those of us doing government-funded work in Australia, for example, NDIS, Workforce Australia, and so on, the issues of confidentiality and privacy are always present. What advice would you give to organisations wishing to mitigate the risk and enhance the confidence of our funders who will assume we are using AI to do our business at different levels?
So from a security point of view, we have to make sure that we know where our data is and that we have the right security measures around our data. Unless you have your data governance right, then the rest will not work. So if I look at, NDIS, for example, or any sort of government agency where we're using people's data, we have a responsibility to ensure that that's secure and that we only allow access to those systems that have to have access. And that's some of the things that we're finding now as we start to roll out these solutions. We may think that we've got all the right guardrails in place, but we're now seeing exposures around this system can now access sensitive data and leak that data to another system. That should happen. So we have to get our data right. The data, AI is only as good as the data that you have. Then from a security point of view, the governance that you put around that data is super important now. And it's always has been important, but it's even now more imperative because it's not users now accessing it. It's system to system to system. You know, we may integrate from another system, from another government agency. We may be pulling data from another source here. These systems, a lot of them are open and have access to that. So that's just, you know, one of the things that we have to be considerate around.
So do you think then it's really making sure that you've got that lens when you're looking at it to begin with, so that you're not exposing a wide array of information?
Absolutely. So visibility is key in this area. Once you have visibility, then you can put the right controls in place, then you can set the right policies. But without that visibility, we're not sure what's going where and what's happening there. And we've had a lot of hard lessons. Like there was an incident with Samsung a few years ago where someone thought they were just, you know, coding and putting some code into an AI to see if that could help them develop their code a lot quicker. They didn't realize once that code went into the AI system, then it's exposed to everyone. Same as our data. We may think, you know, I'm putting Chris's data into a system just to find out what's his background or what's his history on something, not thinking about, okay, well, if Chris has a certain challenge or issue, is that exposure right or wrong? And that's the part that we need to ascertain. So that's where, again, it's a learning that we're going through, but I think having the right governance and the right frameworks in place is super important, but also culturally, we have to have the same mindset across the organizations as well.
Yeah. How about you, Raji? Do you have a take on this?
Yes, I mean, Chris mentioned like shadow AI is a big challenge. So, you know, not just the systems you deploy within your organization, but especially in NDIS you know, kind of scope, you know, depending on which study you look, it's between 40 to 80% of users in your organization are using public large language model, public AI tools and exposing it. So that risk is already there. So that's one of the number one things you must do, even if you don't have any AI projects like agentic AI projects, users are already using it. So that is number one. The other aspect is if you are looking at data and you are using that data to do your day-to-day business, you must have human in the loop, which is human review process, especially when it's involved in decision making, especially when it's involved in very vulnerable, customers. But I think that has to be built into the process.
And I think that kind of dovetails into Nada's question about what risks are organizations underestimating when they start deploying AI more broadly.
So I think the shadow AI is a big one. And you must treat AI as like a software release management. So you need to have your development environment, test environment, production environment. How do you do when a new model changes? How do you update? And also, how do you educate your staff on an ongoing basis? It's not just you do training right now.
Forget.
It's ongoing because things change. Models change, the way they operate.
Especially in this space. Like, it is insanely fast moving and constantly changing, isn't it?
That's right. Yeah. And on top of that, one of the key things that a lot of organizations miss is the organization change management. The communication around, we are using AI for good, we are using AI to augment staff, not to replace, because there's a lot of noise around that. I think you need to address that up front, because there are studies done, about 31% of AI projects are sabotaged by staff, internal staff.
Internal, which was such an interesting stat when you shared that with me. Yeah, it's not something that you think about, that it will be internally done. Okay, we've got a question from Liam. I think this is, I think it's for both of you. Do you find that running your AI models locally mitigates some of the security risks found using hosted solutions like ChatGPT and Google Gemini?
So there's a number of ways of hosting. So if you think, ChatGPT or Claude, they are provisioned or hosted by third parties, obviously those companies, but you can have those models hosted in your own tenancy in your private cloud, which has got enterprise data protection, responsible AI. So it's within your own tenancy. Your data is not used to train the models. It doesn't go outside your tenancy. So if you have things like an Azure tenancy, M365 tenancy, currently your data is already in there. So those models can be hosted in those tenancies securely. So that's a really good option to look at. But local hosting means, in a private cloud scenario, obviously that could be costly, and there are options. But the challenge with local hosting is a lot of those models, unless they are open source models, they're not available for local hosting. So option you have is if you want to use things like Claude or OpenAI, most OpenAI models, it has to be a public cloud, but in your own tenancy. So that's kind of restricted that. And if you want to host anything in private hosting or local hosting in your machine, or they have to be open source models.
Interesting. How about you, Chris?
Yeah, absolutely. From a security point of view, there are benefits, but then you're losing the benefits of the open scale of AI and how it should be learning in that. And again, it's going to be one of those things around, technologies evolve. We've always had on-prem services initially. Then we're like, okay, let's let it go to the cloud. AI is going through the same transition where it's the risk appetite. We want to take advantage of these technologies, which is absolutely correct, but we're too scared to let it out in the open world. So that's where we have to be very mindful of what security measures and what guardrails we're putting in place to do that. If someone wants to get into your environment, they'll get in, whether it's on premise, not hosted, or private. So, but if we put the right guardrails in place, if we have the right visibility, it's remiss of us not to actually leverage the open ecosystem to do that. But if it gives businesses comfort to host it initially, to do all their testing and they know what the trade-offs are, that's perfectly fine. Learn from that. But at some point, you're going to have to go out and go, you know what, I need this to be online to get the benefits of AI and to get the learnings from what, the hundreds of thousands and millions of customers are using as well.
And add to that, just let's assume that, you are hosting these models in your public cloud, your own tenancy. But a lot of those models, the latest models, are not available in your region. Especially in New Zealand, a lot of these models are not available. So how do you utilize the latest technology? So there are ways to do it, like you don't send the data out, you only send the processing out. So you have to look at those different kinds of operating models, not just we have to host everything locally. So those models will be disrupted. You need to think about that. Your policies might have to change, as Chris mentioned, but really dig into where is the risk, not just security, what is the risk you're willing to take. The other aspect is, even if you host locally, AI models, they make mistakes. You're still not going to avoid that. So you need that human review process, whether you host it locally or not.
Yeah, and that's something we always talk about, like human in the loop, just to make sure everything, especially at the moment, is managed. So I'm just going to, it's my security.
There you go. Good.
It keeps, okay. All right, I've got another question. Okay, so if you had to define the lightest set of non-negotiable guardrails needed to scale beyond pilots, what are they, and what do you deliberately leave out at the start to avoid slowing down adoption?
I'll probably give that to you, Rajith, because on the computer says no initially. But yeah, no, and I'll dovetail into that.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah. So minimum, you must have enterprise data protection. There are 5 parts that we can talk about a little bit later. So that's basically making sure that whatever you send to those models are not used for training, your data is safe. There's a number of elements around. You must have responsible AI practices in place. So bias, things like that. Those 2 are given. And then you should have your release management, dev, test, prod kind of structure there when you go in there. So those are non-negotiable. And I think Chris mentioned around AI policy, how that must be in place. The other thing I say is pick a use case that's internal. Don't roll out to customers or customer facing, but do it internally first, because then you can reduce the risk exposure. You can keep it within your tenancy. The liability around AI making mistakes is low. Pick simpler use cases that have a bigger impact. And it's going to do three things. One is it's going to give you an opportunity to, obviously, if it's successful, it's going to show good results, which means the AI adoption will rise within the organization. It's going to be a good opportunity for staff to learn how to use AI. And then, of course, once you get the success, the first few projects, then you can move on to more complex things, even external. Depending on the study, I think you mentioned 75% of AI projects fail, or 80%, depending on which one you look at. So it's really important to pick those use cases that are high impact, but roll out internally first.
Yeah, and just to add to that as well, and the reason why I asked Rajith to answer that question first, because everything has to be secure by design in nature. And I think now we've moved to a point now where people that are deploying these projects have to have security front and center. So the things that Raji mentioned are absolutely critical to doing that. And then as we evolve, we can start to implement other controls that go into place. However, now we're at a point where we need to ensure that the teams that are building these applications are thinking secure by design first, but we have to ensure that we impart the knowledge around what is security and what does it mean to that particular thought process. Going back years ago, application or dev teams didn't have security front and center, and then would find those issues, whereas now we're seeing an evolution of people start to think of security, thinking that data is important, thinking the guardrails has to be in place. So by doing that, we're now sharing the responsibility, but making sure that everyone thinks secure by design first, get things off the ground, look at internal concepts first. Then as we start to roll out, we start to look at, okay, what are the other measurements that we have to put in place? How do we access data? What are the protections? What are the inline protections that we need to look at later on? But having the secure by design first mindset inherently within the team is super important, because then they don't have to think, oh, what would the security team think about this? At least we have comfort that they're thinking in that mindset already.
Yeah, and going beyond the security team, as you said, like
Correct.
a bit more broad. Okay, another question. In light of the insights from Anthropic's Mythos model, which has highlighted numerous gaps in our current infrastructure, what sort of guardrails would you recommend, as AI has advanced so much, but a lot of organizations are still catching up on AI?
Yeah, so this is a huge challenge, especially in Australia. AI literacy across corporate users, as I mentioned before, is very low, and our adoption is very low as well. Things like these new models that are coming out with very amazing benchmarks, you should establish within your organization a center of excellence for AI to test, validate, evolve, and see what those models do, and how we can adopt to the business, or engage a partner, or do it in a hybrid way. In organizations, you need to have that center of excellence consistently looking at what's changing. And look, important thing is that these models, that new things that are come out, if you're not even utilizing the existing models for simple use cases, looking at very complex models, which can be very expensive to run, it's not really relevant at this stage. What I suggest is look at the use case. And for example, if you are doing some annotations or document extraction and things like that, you could run even a GPT 3.5 model, which is really low cost, can give you really high accuracy. You don't need the latest model. So it's about understanding in a workflow which parts of tasks can be offloaded and what is the best model available. In Microsoft Azure, there's 11,000 models to choose from, including a lot of the Claude models, right? Don't pick the highest, the most expensive, or the most capable one. Pick the one that's relevant to you. If it's just a one-shot model, you pick those models. Then a reasoning model could be for other tasks, but it's really important to understand the workflow.
Richard, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, similar thing. I think from a security point of view, it's highlighting there are vulnerabilities, and they're going to keep evolving, and they're going to keep changing. So how do we systematically test these things in a sandbox type environment? Allow it to break everything, so we know what's happening, because these things are constantly adapting and evolving. There are now a lot of AI security controls and methods that are coming into place now that are learning the behaviors. But unless we're learning from those applications, those use cases, then we can't train our systems to defend against those areas. Zero-day vulnerabilities are of the past now. AI now has accelerated that to the next level, and we're now seeing, even encryption types being broken. Once we start looking at post-quantum computing and PQC coming into place now, I guess the paradigm around security is going to shift. So unless we allow our systems to learn, I guess, what the risks are and what the threats are, then we're never going to adapt and learn to that. So do it in a controlled environment, understand what the risks are. There could be risks that aren't exposed out into the wild world. So you can go, okay, I can now mitigate that. I know that's on an exposed point, but there's some things here now that if we don't put the guardrail in place, it's not going to allow us to circumvent that in the future. We're going to have vulnerabilities no matter what, but unless we've got context around those vulnerabilities, then we're never going to know how to do that. But we have to be mindful that this is just going to accelerate at speed, at pace, and there'll be a vulnerability that doesn't exist today that could exist in the next 60 minutes or in the next hour. So I guess it sounds scary, but we have to allow our systems and our people to be able to, act at pace and evolve the way we do security in the new world now.
Just one more thing to add to that is, a practical way of addressing this is run discovery tools within your enterprise. Like Purview has discovery around whether users are putting PII data into chat windows, whether you're using third-party LLMs. So you, at least as a minimum, you can see what's happening in your enterprise, and then you can see what are the high-risk behavior before you even lock things down. So I think that's number one thing you must do right now is use tools like Purview, and there are other tools as well, to run discovery of what's happening in your organization. What tools are users using, and what are the vulnerabilities that are coming through? And that's an ongoing process. You can look at that, and then that gives your top 10 list of holes to plug.
Yeah, know what you're working with.
That's
know
right.
your current landscape to figure out the right and easiest practical thing to do going forward. Yeah. Hey, another question. Do you see AI and its guardrails evolving over the next 12 to 24 months? So they want you to predict the future a little bit. Where do you see it going?
Look, I think guardrails, it's an interesting one, because it's like Chris mentioned, it's a balance between functionality and, I guess, locking things down. So definitely, especially the EU Act, demanding organizations to have a registry of all your agents, what they're doing, and audit trails. So that's happening right now. So even if organizations vendors are, LLM providers are, pushing out these models, you're going to get more restrictions around understanding what's happening in your enterprise and what are your agents doing. Especially with productivity tools like Copilot, you can create your own agents. So what's going to happen is users are going to create their own agents. The business units are going to create their own agents. You're going to get agent sprawl. And in Australia and New Zealand, we are going to get laws like the EU Act, where you need to know what's happening in your enterprise. You need to know what the agents are doing. You need to know what data has been exchanged, to a level where what are the prompts? Are you adhering to responsible AI practices? So in the next 12 months, I think the laws and the compliance acts, things will change, which will, I think, force organizations to be more accountable for what's happening in AI in their organization.
Yeah, and just to add to that, this is where identity becomes super important across the board now. AI is going to be treated like a staff member. All agents. We are now starting to see, if we want to talk about evolution of guardrails, right now, sort of the AI agents are sort of free to do what they want. Soon they're going to be like employees. And we are starting to see, not so much here in Australia, but overseas, where they're building HR departments for AI agents, which I know is a bit of it's a mind-blowing thing, but it is the truth. They're giving them a staff ID. They're giving them access. They can't do background checks, unfortunately, so we're not sure about that. But we have to know what these agents are doing, because especially when there's agent-to-agent communication or things that are happening, we talk about insider risk or insider threats. Usually it's human, but this is where now identity becomes super important. It's people, it's machines, it's agents, it's everything now. We have to have that identity. And until we understand the identity, we don't know what policies to set, and we don't know how to treat that system in place now. So I think from a guardrail point of view, definitely the evolution of identity and creating identities for these agents in particular, and then treating them like employees. And you will have a department that will have to manage these AI agents. The AI agent sprawl is going to happen. We're all going to have our own agents, but we can't let them do whatever they want within an organization. They're going to have set policies in place to be able to, help mitigate the risk that they could cause.
Yeah. And just, if you take on that, AI as an employee, a concept further, you have to onboard them. You have to give them access to the right things. Not everything. You need to control that access. And if you think of it as an intern, you need to onboard them. You're not going to give them access to production, systems straight away. You need to build that trust associated with that. You need to have policy. You need to have certain rights associated with that. There's going to be licensing assigned to agent accounts now. And then what does that mean? And HR department's going to be, like Chris said, has to evolve. So I think it's not just about policies and beyond that. We are going into new operating models within enterprises.
Yeah, that is going to be a whole new world, right? Can you imagine HR, looking at it from that lens too, not people, but, we're calling agents co-workers even. So how does that really start shaping tomorrow? All right. We've hopefully more questions come up, but just maybe giving a few people more time. I'll move on to one of our questions here, Raji. On the point you were making earlier around the AI literacy gap, can you elaborate on how CBS is helping customers and what practical advice you can give around that? I think you touched on some of that already, but...
Yes, so CBS has a number of literacy programs. It's not like, online courses or anything you do, because what I find those courses are, they can be very technical and they are very generic. But what we have is we have sessions with you to understand whether it's each business unit or organization, like what's specifically relevant to you. And then we design training programs for that. And also, it's, as I mentioned before, it's not just about doing the training and walking away. It's establishing that ongoing training mindset and culture within your organization. So imagine that, you set up things like social learning, where you have, groups where you can share, pop prompts, or have a once a month lunch and learn. I know we do them internally, and share some of the challenges or some of the really cool things that we've done with AI. And that 7% of users who are advanced users, they're your ideal candidates to run these sessions, because they're passionate about their advanced users. They can lift the rest of the organization up. And also, when your peers are telling you, oh, these are the really cool things to do, that's really great. And, in some of those sessions that we do, you'll come up with let's just say you came up with 2 or 3 prompts that are really helpful that you can do today on a day-to-day basis. It could save you half an hour per day, or help you to be more structured throughout the day. So it could have a huge impact in your organization. And I think that is an area that we must focus on, because there is no point putting a very complex agent with a chat interface if you don't even know how to use basic prompting. So if you are thinking of rolling out agents in your organization, especially interactive agents, if you don't have the literacy across your organization, how are staff going to use those agents effectively? So before you go off and rolling off agents, what I suggest is roll out your enterprise chat. With Microsoft E3 licenses, you get Copilot chat out of the box. Roll it out across the board. get some training programs, we can offer that, get the entire literacy of your organization up so they're ready for more advanced cases.
Fantastic. And similar veins, security literacy, as you mentioned before, is also really important as a part of all of this.
Yeah, so like AI security awareness now is, again, going to another level. Most organizations have put in security awareness, but the AI security awareness is another change now. We're starting to see social engineering become a big factor within AI as well, because now we have agents that can act as people and can ask questions. I could be an AI agent, an AI calling into a service desk, asking to get Rajith's permissions lifted, for example. So it's how do we make that? How do we have that awareness now? Because these systems and machines are becoming smarter. They're mimicking our voices. So AI is not just a technology. It's like we're now interfacing with potential human. We can't see them.
Can't tell.
We can't tell.
Mm.
So having that awareness now and sort of picking up the cues, and we have to help. Whether it's and usually social engineering happens at the service desk level. So an agent could call in, that's an AI-based agent, could call a poor level 1 help desk, put a bit of pressure on that particular person, impersonate their Raji, and ask them to elevate their credentials in order to gain systems. So that awareness now is, how do you verify that you're talking to a human? Step number 1. As I start to upload information into these systems, we have to be aware of, is that data private? Now there's controls in place now that we can put in there to prevent people from doing it, but it's just creating that awareness so people have that mindset of, if I share this information, what could happen? It may be simple financial documents, a P&L statement that finance are putting into AI just to create a pretty report, but we have to be mindful: is that information, private?
Yeah. Because
if it does go out there, then it's out there. So again, it's building that other layer. I think as most organizations have become mature in that way, we have to keep evolving, I guess, the awareness around that. And it is a continuous literacy thing. And I think this is where it's everyone's responsibility. Also, generationally, we've got 4 generations now in the workforce, maybe 5 soon. So we have to have different ways of communicating and training everyone. I look at my kids now, they're going to come into the workforce already embedded. People like myself that didn't have technology, that have technology now, we have a different version. So we have to ensure that all our training is delivered, customized to each person, and that we're evolving our processes around that.
Such an interesting landscape now, isn't it? It's multi-layered. Got a few more questions come up. So, who is accountable for enforcing the AI guardrails, and how is compliance measured and reported?
There's no short answer, but it's everyone's responsibility, from board to executives all the way down, and that starts with your policy. Once we set a policy and that we agree as a business this is our policy, then ultimately, operationally, it's up to the security team to implement that policy. But it's not the security team's responsibility to create the policy. So responsibility is now not just the IT problem anymore, it's a board level issue. And now we're starting to see boards becoming more literate around technology. And they're starting to employ people with security backgrounds. So when we do have these conversations around responsibility, we all have to be aware of, what are the risks? What are the trade-offs? What does it mean to a business? So when we do agree, it's not just the poor, IT person or security person make that decision. They feel like, okay, the business has endorsed this policy. So if something goes wrong, because it is going to go wrong, we understand what the risks are, and we have the measures in place to be able to react to that. And that's board level all the way down to employee now. So it's not an IT only problem now. Responsibility is across the business.
Certainly leaders definitely are not able to shape that responsibility across the organization, not just leave it to IT.
Yeah, and now people are responsible. So if there is a cyber breach now that happens, the CEOs on the hook, the board level, everyone's now got skin in the game now, accountability for these issues, and it's something that's had to happen. Unfortunately, it's taken a long time to get to this point, but we've seen a lot of issues happen where unfortunately businesses haven't taken ownership of the problem. IT have gone to the business saying, hey, we need to do X, Y, and Z. If we don't do this, this is what's going to happen. And they've ignored it. They haven't invested. Then when something does happen, then it's like, okay, the finger pointing. We've seen enough breaches now to learn the repercussions. Unfortunately, people have felt responsible for that. And it's usually the security person, the IT person, whereas now we're all taking a shared responsibility for these issues, and it should be shared. And now the governments are putting measures in place and having, I guess, repercussions. If we identify a risk and someone's raised that to the board, if they choose not to do something, it's not the team's fault. It's a business problem that we have to address.
And I think the other, another kind of complication, or what we need to prepare for is the leaders, right? So not just staff literacy. Leaders have to have AI literacy to make the right decisions. So, and that's another aspect of it. And it could be that, you are making decisions not just for the organization, you're making for the staff, making for the brand, making for, a lot of levels. So I think, the question is, are your leaders ready to make those decisions? So is one of, the AI accelerator sessions we do is very well targeted leaders, C-level execs, working through what information do you need and how much you need to be literate about or know things about to make the right decision for your business, for your business unit. So, and because there could be a lot of repercussions down there. So I think another area to focus on is your leadership team AI literate, or do they have enough information? Do they know enough about AI to make the right decisions as well?
And that's a trick, isn't it? Like making the right decisions. Like, how do you get them to understand what's happening, understand the risk, and then make those calls?
That's right.
So it's the calls that they've got to make.
And it's what we're seeing is because of a lot of the noise, and we've designed these sessions just to address that. There's a lot of noise. So one of the questions I, Raji, I'm getting, this, vendor coming up to me and doing this third party doing this, giving me SOWs, giving me these are the tools you need to deploy. So much to go through, and then you got the social media. When there's a new model, come out today. What does that really mean? Claude Cowork, all confusing. Everything is called Copilot, and so many different versions of it. So how do you navigate that? So leaders have to make decisions. They have to present to the board. They need to understand cost, and we haven't even touched that because figuring out how much these things cost is not just the CFOs are not just signing off licensing; they're signing off tokens. Now you're becoming token economists, right? So the leadership team needs to really raise up or increase their vigilance and understanding around how to make the right decision. And I think that's the key. And this is where CBS has been focusing on helping leaders navigate that, cut through the noise, because we have years of experience, practical rollouts of AI with a lot of our staff who's, from not just last 3 years, we've been rolling out AI solutions for a long time. Just cut through the noise. Can you get ROI out of AI? And do you understand the total cost of ownership, and is it going to benefit the business?
Another question, what would a basic AI literacy program look like for a government workforce that is mostly non-technical? And how do we keep ongoing, not just it being a one-off training?
Okay, so CBS has an AI literacy program, just like I would call fundamentals, getting started one. So what if you have like a Microsoft presence, most organizations do, E3 or above licenses, you have Copilot Chat. So enable Copilot Chat and build a training program around it. We can have in a couple of sessions show even the most basic user, give some templates and libraries and how to do some basic prompts, basic things day to day they do, how to upload a document, get summarization, get insights, basic prompts you need to do. That is where you start. And that is a small program that we can do for organizations that has a really big impact. Get everyone excited about it, get everyone on board, get everyone to try things out. So this is ideal for a government organization. You already have your licenses. You don't have to go and buy anything new. That's important. Leverage what you already have. You can run some training sessions and help users get started in AI and start using simple things that actually will change maybe half an hour to an hour of save you time in your organization.
And something I think we spoke about was, when we're looking at training and literacy, to not just have everyone together in the one session, you really do need to plan your stakeholders and the people that are coming in. So you group them into, here's, they're not technical, we need to start from the beginning, like really understand the group that's right. Going to be trained, and then really go from there, because it might be a conversation and starting from what they see day to day and really tailor that to what they need.
So tailoring is really important. Understanding your personas, understanding business units. So for example, we recently did sessions around, okay, it's a finance team, and understanding who the personas within that finance team, and then targeting for them. Okay, for finance, you're doing analysis of P&Ls, and what are your 3 prompts you could do with Excel or something like that, right? That could be something simple that they do every day that we can teach them on to it better. And then a marketing team might be something different. There may be lead generation. There could be ways of doing that with a couple of different prompts. Sales team, before you go to a meeting, we do this as well. How do you do due diligence for organizations? So we can maybe a couple of prompts can get information, read their board report, summarize, come up with a pitch. So we could give very interesting insights and really small bite-sized things to do, targeted per business unit, per persona. And that's where the real impact is.
And especially for non-technical, I think examples help.
Yes.
Right, because you're not really going to get it until you try and go, oh, I get what this means to me now in how I can, do things.
Yes, I mean, example is that, we have, what's called a list of prompts or prompt library we can give for a certain business unit. And all they have to do is cut and paste that and insert, as this, do this, so that kind of a story. So we could actually give those, and then you don't even have to think about a new prompt. You just have to cut and paste the template and fill in the blanks. So it could be that simple for people who are just starting off their journey.
Fantastic. A couple more questions, I think, before we move to your final remarks. What is a small change you have seen clients make that materially improved trust in how AI was being used in an organization?
So at CBS, we promote what's called a human-centered design, human-centered AI, sorry. Human-centered AI, it's actually based on human-centered design. Human-centered AI methodology where communicate to your wider audience around humans are the center, and AI is an augmentation for your business, right? So it's going to amplify and support. That is the biggest message you can give to your organization, because there's a lot of noise around job loss. So, and if you are saying, oh, we are rolling out AI, everyone's going to, freak out pretty much. But have communication out. Look, we are looking at improving efficiency and supporting you. Why don't you come up with things that you don't like to do? Takes a lot of your time, where you can focus on better things. Get people involved early, have those discussions, have those hard questions early, and get them to contribute, get different stakeholders to contribute. Start with small focus groups, get representative from everyone. That's how, once you establish that it is a human-centered AI approach, where humans come first. I know in social media, the companies we are an AI-first company. I think that is very dangerous to do that. That's, you are asking yourself, it's setting yourself up for failure. If you say we are a human-first organization and we are using AI for augmentation, and get that message across, that is the one small thing has the biggest impact. That'll make your AI project success. You're going to drive adoption. you're going to get more people coming up with ideas how you can transform the business.
And that will help cull that stat that you were saying, where it's all internal sabotage that's happening, and because you want it to be successful.
That's right.
And yeah. Okay, let me just quickly make sure that we've covered all the questions before I move into. Oh, good. So, Chris, do you want to start us off with your final remarks for the session?
Absolutely. It's been a great discussion, by the way, and hearing the questions from the audience has been also good. We have to embrace changes in technology, and we have to embrace what's happening in front of us. From a cybersecurity point of view, we are very risk adverse for a reason. We are now training and helping our organizations understand that. We have to be seen as the enabler to these technologies, and we have to make sure that we're putting the right frameworks in place. So when any customer that I speak to, whether they're a tier 1 bank or a non-for-profit or a government agency, it's what policies do we have in place that's going to help govern these projects that everyone is on the board with. Second part is back to, everyone's talking guardrails. What are the guardrails that we have in place? How do we protect our data? How do we protect our people? Ultimately, humans are always going to make a mistake. They're going to click something. They're going to do something wrong. It's just the nature of what we do. Expect things to break. Okay, we can't be perfect, and sometimes it's that old analogy, paralysis by analysis. Sometimes we just got to get it out there, get it working, learn, and move on. It's not going to be perfect on the first round, and that's from a security standpoint as well. Things are going to come up that we weren't sure about. Something new is going to come into place. But don't allow that to happen. It is scary because it's like this new world that we're working into, but we have to embrace it. And as long as the business is on board with, hey, we want to do this, and we're communicating that upstream, ultimately we're trying to deliver an outcome and we're trying to make our jobs better. Raji made the point around, is this going to take my job? No, it's going to help me do my job better. And that's also from an IT professional point of view. If I look at the cyber technologies that are coming into place that have agentics built in to help me operate better, so I can then do the more fun work, then that's great as well. So yeah, so policy, communication, 80-20 rule, roll something out internally, learn from it, and then keep evolving as you go forward, and constantly communicate with all your team members and make sure that we are helping our data and AI people and our people understand the security risks. It's on us to educate everyone, and it's up to us to help impart that knowledge as we move forward. So communication is key to anything. Like all relationships, this is no different in these things as well. And if we take that methodology, companies that embrace that mindset, they'll get ahead. They'll feel good about doing these things, and they'll feel empowered to actually, go ahead and do things.
Absolutely. How about you, G?
It's interesting because, when we are, growing up as kids, we ask hundreds of questions every day, right? We're curious.
Built-in prompting. Yeah.
That's true, yeah.
Funny you mentioned that. So we are used to asking questions, and when we give an answer, we keep asking follow-up questions. What does that sound like? Talking to a LLM. So however we lose that. We lose that curiosity when we grow up as adults, grow into adults. Maybe it's not all of us are probably, but that is the most important thing. Curiosity is going to be the most important skill in the next decade. So, and to Chris's point, be curious, be experiment, have a budget allocated to have projects that you experiment, you try things out, and build a culture where you can learn fast. I know people say fail fast, learn fast, because that's the thing. If you can learn things fast, then you can adapt quicker. Bring that curiosity back, and make an environment and a space for people to be comfortable being curious, and be okay to make mistakes, okay to learn from it, share the mistakes, share the things that are broken. And I think that's a really key thing. And we have to have that from an organizational point of view. And as an individual point of view, think about how can I be curious? How can I ask questions? How can I iterate? That's exactly what you're doing when you're talking to ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude. You're asking a question, then ask a follow-up question to get more information. You're verifying the statistics, you're verifying the information. So that sounds very much like your kid asking lots of questions. So my final thought is be curious. And when you're looking at AI, as Chris also touched on it, look at it from a point of view of not whether it's accurate, whether it's safe, or whether it's this. Obviously, we need to put all of that stuff together. But the most important thing is it useful? Is it going to solve a problem? Is it going to make things better? Is it going to find a new way of doing business? The important thing is it useful?
Fantastic. I think that wraps us up for today. Thank you, Chris and Raji, for sharing all of your thoughts. Thank you to everyone for your questions and joining us today. Off the back of this, if you do have any more questions for our fantastic experts here, please do not hesitate to contact us and they'll be able to get back to you. You'll also get an email with the recording of this session, as well as some more resources and maybe offers as well from the team. Again, thank you for joining us and appreciate it. Hope you found that useful.
Thanks, Steph.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steph.
Rajith.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone.